What poverty teaches you that wealth never will. What if the hardest years of your life taught you things money never could? Because wealth can buy comfort, but it cannot recreate hunger, shame, or the discipline of having no one to save you. And once you understand what poverty really does to a person, you will never look at success the same way again. Poverty teaches you that every small number matters. Poverty teaches you that numbers are never just numbers. A few dollars is not a few dollars when it stands between you and gas for the week, dinner for tonight, or the ability to pretend everything is fine for one more day. When you have very little, even the smallest amount of money carries emotional weight. You feel it in the pause before buying something basic. You feel it in the way your mind starts calculating before your hand even reaches for your wallet. People who have never lived that way often think poverty is defined by the big dramatic moments, eviction, debt, disaster. But more often, it lives in the tiny decisions, the things you put back, the things you delay, the things you learn to live without. Poverty teaches you that small numbers can control an entire day, and sometimes an entire identity. Poverty teaches you to notice everything. Poverty sharpens your awareness in ways comfort never has to. You start noticing prices before products, expiration dates before cravings, body language before words. You can hear the difference between generosity and pity in someone's voice. You can tell when a bill is coming before it arrives. You begin reading the world through details other people move past without a second thought. That is one of poverty's quietest lessons. It forces you to become observant because missing something small can cost you something big. You notice how long food will last. You notice which shoes are starting to wear out. You notice who suddenly acts different when money enters the conversation. Wealth can make life smoother, but poverty makes you alert. It teaches you to scan every room, every receipt, every expression, because when resources are limited, attention becomes its own form of survival. Poverty teaches you that shame can be quiet. Poverty is not always loud. It does not always arrive as tragedy, collapse, or some dramatic public failure. More often, it moves quietly through ordinary moments and leaves its mark there. It is the hesitation before joining friends for dinner when you already know you cannot afford what they will order. It is saying you are not really hungry when hunger is exactly what you feel. It is pretending not to want the thing you already decided you cannot have. That is what makes poverty so psychologically exhausting. It teaches you how to disappear inside small humiliations, how to smile while quietly subtracting yourself from the moment, how to make deprivation look like choice. People tend to think shame comes from being judged, but often it comes from anticipating judgment before anyone says a word. Poverty teaches you that shame does not need an audience. It can live entirely inside you, growing in silence, shaping the way you speak, ask, want, and even dream. Poverty teaches you how to survive on less than you need. Poverty teaches a brutal kind of adaptation. It teaches you how to live below your needs for so long that deprivation starts to feel normal. You learn how to stretch food, delay repairs, wear things past their life, and call it discipline when it is really endurance. You become skilled at shrinking yourself to fit the limits of your situation. Your wants get smaller, then your standards. Then, if you are not careful, even your sense of what you deserve. That is one of poverty's deepest lessons. Survival is not always heroic. Sometimes it is simply the ability to keep going while quietly accepting less than a healthy life should require. And the longer you live that way, the more dangerous it becomes, because human beings can adjust to almost anything. Poverty teaches you how far a person can bend without breaking, but it also teaches you how easy it is to confuse endurance with strength, when in truth, sometimes you were never meant to carry that much for that long. Poverty teaches resourcefulness. Poverty teaches resourcefulness in a way comfort never has to. When you do not have enough money to solve a problem directly, you learn how to solve it sideways. You repair what other people replace. You reuse what other people throw away. You learn how to stretch, swap, improvise, and make something usable out of almost nothing. And over time, that does more than sharpen your practical instincts. It changes the way you think. You stop seeing limits as the end of the road and start seeing them as the beginning of a different kind of creativity. That is one of the strangest gifts poverty can leave behind. It forces ingenuity out of necessity. You become the kind of person who can make a little go far, who can build with scraps, who can keep moving when the obvious path is closed. Wealth can buy convenience, but poverty teaches invention. It teaches you how to keep a life functioning when almost nothing in it is easy. Poverty teaches you the emotional weight of dependence. There are few feelings heavier than needing help when you no longer want to ask for it. Poverty teaches that lesson early, and it teaches it well. It teaches you what it feels like to hesitate before sending a message, to rehearse how to ask, to make your need sound smaller than it is so it feels less humiliating to say out loud. Dependence is not only financial, it is emotional. It changes the way you stand in front of people. It changes the tone of your gratitude. It changes how much of your pride you are willing to swallow just to get through one more week. And once you have felt that weight deeply enough, something in you hardens around it. You start promising yourself that if you ever get out, you will never again be at the mercy of someone else's timing, generosity, or judgment. Wealth may offer independence, but poverty teaches why independence matters, with a force that comfort never could. Poverty teaches gratitude in a way wealth rarely can. Poverty teaches gratitude on a scale so small that most people would never even recognize it. It teaches you to feel relief over things that others barely notice. A full tank of gas, a fridge that stays stocked through the week, a bill paid on time, a month without anything going wrong. When life has been unstable for long enough, ordinary things stop feeling ordinary. They begin to feel miraculous, and that changes the emotional texture of your life. You become someone who understands the value of small mercies because you have lived without them. Wealth can absolutely make life easier, but ease has a way of dulling awareness. Poverty does the opposite. It sharpens appreciation. It makes you understand that comfort is not just luxury. Sometimes it is simply the absence of fear. That is why people who have known real lack often react differently to security. They do not always celebrate in loud ways. Sometimes they just sit quietly in the presence of enough, deeply aware of how impossible this once felt. Poverty teaches restraint. Poverty teaches restraint long before most people ever call it discipline. It teaches you not to waste, not because minimalism is trendy, but because waste has consequences when there is no backup plan. You become careful with food, with money, with time, with anything that can disappear faster than you can replace it. You learn to pause before spending, to think past the moment, to ask not just, can I buy this, but what will this cost me later? And over time, that caution becomes instinct. It follows you even when life gets better. Sometimes that restraint becomes wisdom. Sometimes it becomes fear. Sometimes it makes you financially stable. Sometimes it makes it difficult to enjoy what you have because a part of you is always saving for the disaster you still believe is coming. That is the complexity of what poverty teaches. It gives you discipline, yes, but it also wires that discipline into your nervous system. And once a person has learned to live as if the margin for error is zero, it is very hard to completely forget that lesson. Poverty teaches you to read people differently. Poverty teaches you to read people with a level of precision that comfort rarely demands. When money is scarce, you become sensitive to the subtle ways people change around it. You notice who becomes impatient when you need more time, who grows generous without making you feel small, who offers help with warmth, and who offers it with hidden superiority. You begin to understand that money does not just reveal character in the person who has it, it reveals character in the people around them too. That lesson stays with you. You learn to hear judgment before it is spoken directly. You learn to recognize pity disguised as kindness. You learn that some people are only comfortable with you when your limitations make them feel stronger. Poverty makes those patterns impossible to ignore. It teaches you that survival is not only about stretching resources. Sometimes it is about learning who is safe to lean on, who is not, and how quickly a person's tone can change when they realize you need something they do not. Poverty teaches you that stress is not always loud. One of poverty's cruelest lessons is that stress does not always arrive like panic. Sometimes it arrives as endurance, quiet, constant, exhausting endurance. It becomes the background noise of your life, the calculation running underneath every decision, the tension in your body that never fully leaves, the inability to rest without feeling like you are forgetting something important. Poverty teaches you what it means to live in a state of prolonged alertness. You may still laugh, still go to work, still show up and appear functional to everyone around you, but inside, your mind is always scanning ahead. The next bill, the next problem, the next thing that could go wrong. That is why people misunderstand financial struggle so often. They imagine crisis as a single dramatic event, when in reality, poverty is just as often a long stretch of low-grade pressure that slowly rewires the way you think and feel. It teaches you that stress does not need to be loud to change a person. Sometimes the quietest pressure leaves the deepest mark. Wealth can remove pain, but it cannot erase memory. Wealth can remove many of the practical pains poverty creates. It can make the bills manageable, the fridge full, the emergencies survivable. It can buy distance from the kinds of problems that once controlled your entire week. But what it cannot do is erase the memory of what scarcity felt like while you were inside it. The body remembers, the mind remembers. Even after life becomes more comfortable, some part of you may still hesitate before spending, still brace for disaster after a good month, still feel a strange guilt in moments that are supposed to feel secure. That is because poverty does not only affect your circumstances, it affects your nervous system. It teaches your brain to expect instability, to prepare for loss, to treat safety as temporary. And once that lesson has been learned deeply enough, money cannot simply undo it. Wealth may change your environment, but memory keeps whispering from underneath it, reminding you how quickly life once fell apart. Wealth can buy convenience, but not the instincts poverty built. Wealth can make life smoother in almost every visible way. It can save time, reduce friction, soften inconvenience, and place distance between you and daily struggle. But there are certain instincts it cannot manufacture, because those instincts were forged under pressure, not comfort. Wealth can buy abundance, but it cannot teach you how to stretch the last of something. It can buy security, but it cannot teach the vigilance that comes from having lived without it. It can buy options, but it cannot recreate the creativity that was born when there were none. That is one of the hardest truths to explain to people who have never known real lack. Poverty leaves behind skills that often look invisible from the outside: emotional endurance, practical ingenuity, an eye for risk, an understanding of how fragile stability really is. Those things are not glamorous, and they are not painless, but they are real. Wealth can improve your life, sometimes dramatically. What it cannot do is teach you what survival already carved into you. Some of your greatest strengths were forged in suffering. There is an uncomfortable truth buried inside hardship. Some of the strengths people admire most are often born in seasons no one would willingly choose. Poverty can forge a kind of endurance that comfort never needs to develop. It can build patience, not the peaceful kind, but the kind that knows how to keep moving while exhausted. It can create resilience, not because struggle is noble, but because surviving it requires a person to keep adapting long after they should have had to. It can deepen empathy too. People who have known what it means to go without often notice pain in others more quickly because they recognize the quiet signs. That does not mean poverty is a gift. It is not. But it does mean that suffering can leave behind something more complex than damage alone. Sometimes it leaves strength. Sometimes it leaves perspective. Sometimes it leaves a person who knows how to carry weight without collapsing under it. And that strength, once forged, does not disappear just because life gets easier. But poverty also leaves scars wealth cannot fully heal. For all the lessons poverty teaches, it also leaves scars that do not simply vanish when the money finally comes. That is the part people romanticize at a distance and misunderstand completely. Poverty can make you strong, yes, but it can also make you fearful. It can make you disciplined, but also unable to relax. It can make you grateful, but also suspicious of comfort, as if peace itself might be taken away the moment you trust it too much. Some people escape the conditions of poverty, but never fully escape its emotional architecture. They still hoard, still hesitate, still feel guilt when life is easy, still prepare for disaster in moments that are supposed to feel safe. That is why poverty should never be turned into some beautiful myth about character building. It teaches, but it also wounds. It sharpens, but it also hardens. And the deeper truth is this: survival may shape a person into someone incredibly capable, but capability is not the same as healing. Some of the strongest people are still carrying what hurt them. Poverty changes the way you define safety forever. One of the deepest things poverty teaches is that safety is never just a number. It is a feeling. And once that feeling has been broken early enough, it becomes very hard to trust again. That is why some people can have more than enough and still not feel secure. They are not reacting to their current reality. They are reacting to an older one. A version of life where one expense could undo an entire month, where one mistake could trigger a chain reaction, where fine was always more fragile than it looked. Poverty teaches you that stability can disappear quickly, and that lesson tends to stay long after the emergency has passed. So even when life improves, the definition of safety changes forever. It is no longer just about having money. It is about having margin, backup, options, distance from helplessness. And even then, some part of you may still be listening for the sound of things falling apart, because once a person has learned that survival can depend on one small number, peace is never experienced as innocence again. It is experienced as vigilance finally getting a chance to rest. Ending wealth may change your life, but poverty changes you. Wealth may change your lifestyle, your address, your options, your comfort, but poverty changes something deeper. It changes how you enter a room, how you spend $1, how long you hold on to things, how quickly you notice risk, how hard it is to ask for help, how grateful you feel for what other people overlook, and how difficult it can be to believe that enough will keep being enough. That is why the lessons of poverty do not disappear when the money arrives. They stay in the body, in the timing of your decisions, in the caution behind your joy, in the strange mix of gratitude and fear that can live inside the same person for years. And maybe that is the hardest truth of all. Poverty does not just teach survival while you are living through it. It keeps teaching you long after it is over. Not because it was beautiful, not because it was necessary, but because it marked you. It left behind instincts, scars, strengths, and memories that wealth can soften, but never fully replace. And once you understand that, you stop seeing success as proof that the past is gone. You start seeing it for what it really is, a life built forward by someone who still remembers exactly what it felt like to have almost nothing.